Hello everyone and welcome to the next lesson. In this lesson we are going to be looking at the different road stages of design. Now road design, it's not just about connecting point A to point B. It's about a journey that's safe, efficient and in harmony with the world around it. And the journey starts long before the first bit of asphalt is laid. Now these stages can vary, but you're going to find that normally we start with something called pre-feasibility study. Now, pre-feasibility is we are exploring the possibilities. Now, again, this is before you do the feasibility study, which we are going to talk about next. Now, here we are normally brainstorming. We tend to identify the potential routes, taking into account existing infrastructure and the environment, and even the social impact on the communities. Now, it's about weighing the pros and cons, the cost and the benefits to narrow down the options. Now, when I started out, it used to be very confusing what pre-feasibility was. Because I'm wondering, because you're going to find later on that pre-feasibility and feasibility, you tend to have also options. So pre-feasibility is the idea is not yet concrete at the start. Maybe they are looking at connecting point A to point B. Pre-feasibility, you can find that they could find that maybe point B is not what you're trying to connect to. Maybe you're trying to connect to point B, C, D. And you're trying to determine which is feasible. Do we move from A to C, A to B, or A to D? And this is at pre-feasibility. Now, when you have determined how pre-feasible each of those options are, you then come to something now we're going to call the feasibility. Now, the next is the feasibility study. Here you're refining the path. And again, just the example I've given before, so we had A to B, A to C, A to D. Now we have in our pre-feasibility, we've established what we think is pre-feasible should be A to B. Now from A to B, there are so many ways how you can get from A to B based on the curves. I mean, you can have different radiuses, you can go through different terms on this route from A to B. Now that's what's happening in the feasibility study. You are trying to establish the route from A to B, which of those different routes is feasible based on the design speed. So for example, you've established the design speed is maybe 70 kilometers per hour or 60 or something. And now which of those routes is feasible based on that design speed? Now once you've established this, you're again going to do a Mite criteria analysis. Using different factors, you're going to use social factors, you're going to use environmental factors, you're going to use geometric design factors, and all these are going to weigh upon the different elements and will determine the most feasible route. Now, from A to B, as I've mentioned already, we had maybe, let's say, 5 routes, and now you have determined the route that is the most feasible in terms of cost. Because you have to look at it in terms of cost. Does it have the return, based on the return? Which route is cheaper? Which route saves more time? Which route has benefit to the communities? Now, this is what's happening in the feasibility study that you didn't do most likely at pre-feasibility, because at pre-feasibility you had so many options. Even a feasibility study could have even more than 4 to 5 options. But then from this, you find that now we're going to the detailed design. Now the detailed design is where, as we mentioned, you've confirmed that route from A to B, and that route has a given design speed. You now detail that route. You now start adding more things to that route in terms of, you now start detailing the drainage structures, you start detailing the pavement. Now all these were looked at in feasibility. A quick element of earthworks and pavement was looked at, but now you're detailing. In detailed design, we are not changing the route. We are sticking to that same route, but we are detailing everything about it. Now, again, I want to provide more clarity regarding this. So we have pre-feasibility, and then from that we have feasibility, and then we have detailed. Now, at all these points, there are things you can do. You can do estimates for land acquisition. You can do the environmental impact assessments. And these are all factors that can weigh into the Mite criteria analysis. Now, it's important to know these different stages because there are cases where you may not have to do a pre-feasibility. That is, the route from A to B is known. You don't have to do a pre-feasibility. But there are cases whereby, let's say they've told you, oh, we need to go to a landing site, and in that case there is no road, but A and B are known. The landing site, the fishing site is here, or the landing site is here, and A is known. So you're wondering, okay, maybe we could have a number of routes. We could maybe pass through this town, maybe this other town, or the northern town. And from that, maybe now you establish that the route B is the best. From there, you have part B, and you say, okay, from A to B is now the most feasible route. Now, among the most feasible routes, there are also other routes that we study in the feasibility. Now, once you've established those routes that are feasible in the feasibility study, you now go and detail that route. And that's normally the stages of road design that you're going to find that you're going to go through always. So there are cases where someone may ask you to do a pre-feasibility, which is normally good. So understand what you're doing, and then you go to feasibility, and now you go to detailed. It's not always advisable to change something in detailed. I can give you examples. There are projects we're working on, and I think working with Nippon Koi, and these are the Japanese. Anytime we change something in the detailed design, for example, there's an area where we're having flyovers, and the clearance, another project came, which was the standard gauge railway, and the standard gauge railway requested that they must have a clearance of 8 meters plus another 2 meters, so 10 meters. So that meant that we had to raise the flyover by roughly, we had put 6 meters, but now another 3 meters. The whole project went back to feasibility because there are a lot of elements that were changing. Based on that gradient, that would change the length of the flyovers, which would change the gradient. Would the heavy vehicles be affected because they had to now climb much more? The whole project went back to feasibility. And that's why you have to be very careful when you are understanding the stage you're in. Make sure you get all the information you need of neighboring projects and all. Because if you don't get this, you will be a detailed design, and I can guarantee you it can take you back to feasibility if you're not careful. And if, for example, you have not had enough information, the whole project will go back to pre-feasibility where people now are not convinced that that route you selected is the best. This happens a lot when you're doing expressways or any other projects. But in a nutshell, most of the projects, 80% that you will do will most likely be feasibility and detailed design with a little bit of pre-feasibility. But then there will be those complicated projects where you now have to do, you have to be very careful, have all the information. By the time you move from feasibility, everything is firmed up. In the detail, you are just detailing. So otherwise, I hope to see you in the next video.